Have you ever felt so hot you just wrote a book? Apparently Louis C.K. did. No joke, the story Holes didn't originate because he had a lot to say about discrimination or the evils of a prison industrial complex. The idea grew from those hot Texan summers he experienced, a heat so brutal it could dry up a lake. While most of his previous works began with the image of a certain character or scenario, this one began with a place. A lake that dried up a century ago and became this hellish landscape where bad boys were sentenced to spend their days digging 5 foot deep, 5 feet wide holes, surviving against sandstorms, rattlesnakes, and the lethal yellow spotted lizards. You wouldn't expect this kind of story coming from a man like him. Based on his interview, C.K. comes off as a very pure and wholehearted individual, which isn't to say that all other authors in comparison are assholes or doing it for the fame, but regarding him, there's a gentle quality that gives you the impression, yeah, I can see him working with kids. Because he actually did. During college, he assisted at an elementary school for credit and called the experience life-changing. His Wayside School series was inspired by the students of that school, as well as the name they gave him, Louis the Yard Teacher. He's been writing since 1976, and while the Wayside series took a while to accumulate a strong fan base, there was something about Holes that really attracted the masses. If you asked him, C.K. would probably tell you that he simply wrote a story, being super humble about the fact that it won the National Book Award, contributed to American literature for children, and was ranked number 6 for all-time's best children's novel in 2012. But ask the readers, and they give you a whole list of why this book is such an enriching read. Exposure on the marginalized group of minorities and incarcerated youth that you don't see very often in fiction, and a semi-complex plot that relies on juggling 3 different time periods and making connections to understand the story's solution without being explicitly told. C.K. did well creating this YA multi-generational tale out of literal hot air, and after 5 years of publication and receiving critical acclaim, he will be in charge of writing the screenplay for its movie adaptation in 2003. This explains why both the book and movie are incredibly similar. I grew up with the movie. This was my first time reading the book, and I was surprised by the similarities. The movie basically played in the back of my mind while I read. A lot of the dialogue remained intact, and the shifts between present day Green Lake and the flashbacks were still there. Of course there are some differences, but the main story itself stayed intact. Hell, even in deleted scenes, the movie addresses Stanley's school life with his bully Derek Dune, the fantasy of his camper friends ganging up on Dune, and even the scene I would never imagine being shot, but there it is. The warden drawing blood from her pitchfork after a camper used the bathroom. Like, goddamn, Mickey! At least you had some restraint to keep it deleted. So yeah, this review isn't going to be much of a comparison. I'll spare you the suspense. Both the book and movie share similar qualities in story, characters, and action. Instead, I'm going to go over some of the key aspects readers and viewers found appealing about the story, the reasons why Holes got the praise it deserved. So grab a shovel, preferably 5 feet, and pour yourself a delicious cup of some good old sploosh, because we're digging out the secrets of what made this story such a beloved treasure. You have 2 choices, a half-hour watch, or jail. I'm sure you'll make the right choice. Let's begin. Now, this isn't your typical summer camp. You can't find this in the traveler's pamphlet, and it's only accessible to kids who can't afford a real camping experience or screwed up their lives so badly they had no choice but to end up here. There's only one camp activity: digging. You're also warned to stay away from the wildlife if you know what's good for you. And if you think you had enough, you can go. The counselors won't stop you because they know that there's nothing out there, not for miles. So unless you're asking for a death wish, you'll come back. They always do. Yes sir, that's Camp Green Lake, the most friendly named prison you ever heard of. Now the question here is, how did a good honest boy like Stanley Yelnats get sent to a place like this? Well, you can blame his great-great-grandfather for that one. Because he stole a pig from a one-legged gypsy, the Yelnats were cursed with eternal bad luck. Their great-grandfather, the first Stanley Yelnats, lost his entire stock market fortune to the nefarious outlaw Kissing Kate Barlow. The third Stanley Yelnats has been an inventor for years, but could never make a breakthrough with any of his projects. And now the fourth Stanley Yelnats, our protagonist, is being branded as a thief for stealing the sneakers of Clyde Sweet Feet Livingston, a famous baseball player who Stanley admires. Like his great-great-grandfather, he was being treated like a no-good, dirty, rotten thief in front of his childhood hero. Stanley's only claim was that the shoes fell from the sky and thought they were a sign of good fortune for his father's latest invention, which is trying to eliminate foot odor. However, those shoes were being donated to a homeless shelter, and if there was anything people didn't like, it was the disruption of a good cause. So Stanley had two choices:
Camp Green Lake or jail.
Little did Stanley know that was a trick question. There's no difference between the two options. Camp Green Lake might as well be jail based on the harsh conditions these campers are put through. Even the actors had to go through physical training just to be able to film for long periods of time. When the campers weren't getting their daily exercise, they chill in the shabby rec room, get their nutritious slop of grub, and sleep in their large 10-man tents. It's very real, which is what I love about the book's writing. Aside from expressing the defining concepts of jail under the false impression of a summer camp, Sakar maintains the danger by establishing the power of authority that goes on around here. And it's effective because of our protagonist's pure and naive nature. Stanley here really believes that the adults running this joint have his good intentions at heart. Adults like Mr. Sir, the gun-slinging, seed-chewing, stank-eyed cowboy who acts as the main security guard over the boys. He's played by Jon Voight in the film, who gives the character this wild personality that's silly but unpredictable to the point where it's best to steer clear from him.
Whoa, what happened to your face?
Then you have Tim Blake Nelson's character, Mr. Pendensky. The complete opposite of Mr. Sir, he's the good cop trying to rehabilitate the boys with group meetings to discuss their past behavior and how they can move forward to become proper citizens. He's the only counselor that makes an effort to connect with the boys, at least with the ones he believes have a good shot at getting out. I forgot how much of a douche he was to Zero in particular. Both in the book and film, there's just a lot of verbal bullying and unnecessary comments to discourage the boy. I was hoping the book could enlighten me more on this harsh treatment towards Zero, but I didn't get any answers. So I consulted the internet, and from what many people and educators said, I started to understand the kind of person Pendensky played in this prison mock-up, and he was no better than the other counselors. Pendensky is a worm. I think casting did an incredible job bringing Nelson to play the role. His voice and appearance are very scrawny, and he doesn't strike fear like Mr. Sir or the warden. Hell, a majority of the campers could overpower him if they wanted. They call him Mom for a reason, and I think Pendensky is fully aware of that, which is why he takes the safer approach of befriending them and staying on their good side, because in this camp's chain of command, he sits at the bottom. For example, the fight between Stanley and Zigzag. He instigated that fight, and when they got too far, he lost control of the situation and shot a bullet to calm them down. They don't respect him at all. Not without fear, they don't. But here you have Zero, a kid who doesn't talk or interact much with anyone and is considered to be an idiot. For a scumbag like Pendensky, Zero became an easy target for him to prove he had some ounce of authority and wasn't the weakest person in the camp. The poor kid became an outlet for this man whenever he wanted to feel powerful. Knowing that, it just makes this scene even more incredible when Zero gives him the reality check that he really was the weakest guy at camp.
D-I-G. What's that spell?
Yet those two got nothing on the warden. In our roster of incredible cast members, we have Sigourney Weaver making her appearance when the ancient lipstick tube from Kids in Cape Barlow is discovered. I like how her introduction gives the audience this false impression that she's nice and understanding only because they managed to lift her mood with the tube. But after a couple days digging in the wrong spot, her facade dies down and she reveals herself to be just as bad as the rest. She wouldn't hesitate to strike poison against her co-workers or erase a kid's existence from the system. That's her level of evil, and adds another layer of danger to this camp's reputation. Inside, outside, it doesn't matter. Disguising this prison as a camp showed kids a whole different side to power and authority without making it too mature. The adults in this story were designed to be feared through presence and threats, and Sakar never tries to sugarcoat the descriptions. The movie does lighten up with more comedic performances through Voight and Nelson, but Weaver remains the true antagonist throughout. And that's without including the already isolating environment. Overall, Camp Green Lake? A bad time for everyone. Now here in Camp Green Lake, we don't discriminate. Doesn't matter if you're here on accident or not, you're all digging holes. Sakar keeps telling it how it is. The majority of these campers are either Hispanic, black, poor, or suffer from some mental problem or addiction like Zigzag's paranoia or Twitch's need to joyride. Through Stanley's perspective, we're looking in on a group he would rarely associate himself with, almost like a fish out of water plot that really explores a specific group of teens typically ignored and aren't given much attention in society. The way the movie handled the characterization of these boys really speaks on the casting job. For most of them, acting is their first time, and yet they still manage to bring out a strong performance through their chemistry alone. Some of the best moments are when it's just them talking and bantering to get through the day, to the point where it doesn't even feel scripted, just a couple boys working out in the yard. The book's version of the boys were tough, but they didn't strike the same intimidation as the movie's characters. Based on this book, I'm convinced dialogue isn't Sakar's strong suit. Most of the conversations felt really stale and sounded one and the same. In terms of exposition, the story still progressed, but it lacked a little personality that the movie interpreted. The hesitation in Stanley's voice when confronted, the fear struck from direct eye contact, and the occasional invasion of personal space. All those little details made these campers more distinguished, in my opinion. As well as how Stanley got the nickname Caveman. I still don't understand how he got that name in the book. The movie made more sense of it by switching the events of finding the fossil first, then tripping over this couch potato, whereas the scenes were flipped in the book. It's such a non-issue, I know, but a good example of how the movie improved the story in certain spots. Also, speaking of names, do you guys know why Hector is nicknamed Zero? I'll give you a second to think about it because it surely blew my mind when I first heard it. Okay, you ready for it? Zeroni. Zero. Yeah, I honestly wonder how many people didn't know that. What's crazy is that the actor himself told me. Apparently Kilo Thomas does a lot of YouTube and Twitch these days, so I checked out a watch along of his, hoping to get some good behind the scene tidbits, and he dropped this on me. In hindsight, it seems super obvious, but I don't think a majority of us were even thinking about it too hard. Either you were distracted by his hair or his small frame size, the two key attributes that had all the girls crushing. But back to the topic at hand, the nicknames contribute to their form of equality by providing a second chance. We all have a nickname of sorts, and when you think about it, it describes a different version of you and brings back specific memories tied to that name. Same could be applied here. You hear the name Stanley, you think of the bullied kid whose family's name was cursed and ended up being convicted for a crime he didn't commit. When you hear Caveman though, you think of the boy who survived a meeting between Mr. Sir and the warden, stole the water truck and drove it straight into a hole, and even made it back after days of surviving the burning desert. Two different names, two different lives. Mr. Podensky might think he's doing these kids a favor by addressing their real names, but who knows what kind of lives they lived prior to this? To be here means that you were most likely living a bad life, so why be reminded of that? Again, it's even worse for Zero. Since he doesn't speak up much, Podensky decided to just call him Zero.
You want to know why they call him Zero? Because there's nothing going on in his stupid little head.
He only reveals his name to Stanley once they start their reading and writing lessons, becoming more open once they both escape from Camp Green Lake. One of my favorite scenes from the book is Zero having this heart-to-heart conversation in the mountains, explaining his homeless background, and even confessing to stealing the shoes, believing that this might be his last night alive. Not only does it strengthen their friendship, but it really points out how different they really are from one another.
Laney Park?
Yeah.
I used to go to Laney Park all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I used to sleep in the tunnel next to the swinging bridge.
Different names, different lives, united by the faults of their past. And it's so ironic too. Not as ironic as this camp becoming the Girl Scout camp by the end, but the fact that this kind of equality happened on land cursed by racism. There actually used to be a lake here. Not just any lake, in fact it was the largest lake in Texas, well known for its peach trees. The only school teacher in town, Miss Catherine Barlow, made some of the best spiced peaches anyone has ever eaten. And the only thing that could ever rival against its quality were Sam the Onion Man's miracle onions. Even with the town doctor, the townsfolk would still buy Sam's onions because of how effective his salesmanship skills were. You got asthma? Drink some onion juice. A bad rash? Rub it down with some good old-fashioned onion lotion. There was nothing his onions couldn't fix. Even love could be remedied. Miss Barlow was a fan of Sam's onions and would always buy extra to feed his trusty donkey, Mary Lou. One day, Miss Barlow was troubled about the rain because her schoolhouse wasn't in the best condition, so Sam happily offered to fix it up in exchange for a couple jars of her spiced peaches. Because Sam was black, he could only work after school and before night classes, and it was within that time frame that he kept Miss Barlow some company while she graded her papers. She really enjoyed their conversations and shared interest in and poetry, so she found reasons to keep him around longer. When he finished fixing the roof, she had him fix the locked window, and when the window was done, she had him fix the crooked door. Pretty soon, the schoolhouse looked brand new, and she ran out of things for him to fix. All that was left was her yearning heart. To be honest, I don't know which portrayal is happier. The book having her run out in the pouring rain to wrap her arms around Sam, or the movie having Sam basically apparate by her desk to ease her woes by delivering his line of many emotions.
I can fix that.
They both end the same way though, sharing a passionate kiss that was seen by an outsider. I side with the movie's focus on Trout Walker, the richest man in the county whose daddy owns the lake. His advances towards Miss Barlow has failed in the past, so seeing her kiss the onion picker over him justified his burning jealousy to, well, burn the school down. A much clever way to subtly overshadow the blatant racism the book presented. When she runs to the drunk sheriff for help, he straight up tells her that Sam's going to be hanged because it's against the law for a Negro to kiss a white girl. No words are minced about the legality of all this, and Miss Barlow learns quickly that she's the only one who thinks this is wrong. And this conclusion is different from the movie because she actually catches up with him in the book. They leave Mary Lou behind and try to sail away together until Trout Walker catches up to them with his big boat. And it's not just different by events either. The book's framing of this conclusion is pretty powerful for a kid's story. For one paragraph, Sakar steps away from the narrative and starts presenting facts as if these characters were on trial, with us the readers acting as the jury. On that day, Trout Walker killed Sam, with Miss Barlow saved against her wishes. Since then, not one drop of rain had fallen on Green Lake ever again. And then he imposes a question to the reader. Whom did God punish? Wow. I was speechless after reading that. To give young readers such a thought-provoking question really shows the amount of respect he gives them. As for the answer, it speaks for itself. In 20 years, this incredible lake would be as grand as a puddle, with the town shriveling around it. The only one to have really survived was Miss Barlow, at least physically. The only man who could fix her heart was dead, and that trauma twisted her entire persona to become a straight-up man-killer, starting with the sheriff.
You still want that kiss?
This was the birth of Kissin' Kate Barlow. For 20 years, she will rob, steal, and kill until returning to the place where she lost herself. In the book, she had a little cabin that she rested in, but I like the movie's image of her sitting by Sam's boat and engaging with her delusions until Trout Walker shows up with one of Kate's old students as his wife. Oh, barf. They try to rob the robber, but Kate ain't budging, not even after the book's forceful approach of making her walk out in the sun barefoot and hitting her with a shovel. She basically cursed the Walker family with this promise of buried treasure somewhere in this desert, and then allowed the yellow spotted lizard to reunite her with Sam. And for the next 90 years, Trout Walker and his descendants spent their days digging for that treasure, passing down the job to the stubborn woman our campers fear today. So I'll repeat it again. Here in Camp Green Lake, we don't discriminate. You won't be judged by your past because at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter. You're all on Walker territory now, being manipulated as her gold-digging slaves. Our last appealing aspect deals with this story's ability to juggle 3 different timelines, but before we can discuss it entirely, we first need to understand the truth about the Yelnats curse. In the book, the story is muddled through the years like a game of telephone, landing on Elia Yelnats being a pig thief who stole from a one-legged gypsy. But here's the thing, Elia wasn't a thief, and that wasn't any old gypsy. She was Madame Zeroni, one of Zero's ancestors who was very good friends with Stanley's great-great-grandfather. She was a woman of many stories and always gave good advice, like when Elia wanted to ask the empty-headed Myra Menka for her hand in marriage.
You should go to America. That's where my son is. That's your future.
Elia was too stubborn to let this love go without a try, so Madame Zeroni decided to help and give him one of her piglets. If he carried that pig up the mountain every day and sang while it drank from the river, he would be able to produce a pig worthy of Myra's love. He would also have to carry Madame Zeroni up the mountain and sing to her after delivering the pig, otherwise she would place a curse on him. Naturally, he didn't take that seriously and carried that little pig every day until it was Myra's birthday. He was also supposed to carry the pig that same day but skipped out because he didn't want to smell like an animal, not realizing how much of a difference it would have made.
Which pig weighs more?
The other side.
It got worse when Elia suggested Myra should decide, hoping that she'd reciprocate the same feelings, but alas, with her head so empty, she couldn't decide and left it all to a guessing game. Elia felt insulted and left his pig as a wedding present, leaving behind this life and following Madame Zeroni's advice by sailing to America. The only problem was that he forgot about his promise to carry her up the mountain, and that, my friends, is how the Yelnats curse originated. All because of stupid teenage love. But it's funny how fate can be sometimes. The chances of a Yelnats and Zeroni locked up in the same prison seem like a 1 in a million chance. Even more so that they got along with each other, just like their ancestors. But that's only because Zero felt guilty being the one who got Stanley there in the first place. And the reason for that was because of Zero's lack of education. This story has a good amount of examples that expresses the consequences of not having a proper education, and the term could apply to a number of things. For starters, because Zero couldn't read whose shoes they belonged to, he couldn't understand their importance. In the book, after Sam finished remodeling the schoolhouse, we see how the townspeople admire the renovated building, saying how their little town of Green Lake values a good education, but only the basic subjects like math or English, and nothing about the importance of love and equality. And when it was destroyed, that also meant the children's futures, and poor Linda Miller had no other options but to marry a dirty trout. Even in present day times, Stanley teaching Zero to read was frowned upon. The campers didn't like it because of the deal those two exchanged. As long as Stanley taught, Zero will offer to dig both their holes. The warden didn't like it because that was one less man digging for her buried treasure. And even when Stanley agreed to dig again, it was still a no on those reading lessons. Why?
Because I said so.
If a poor education is what got them into this predicament, then the proper education was the solution. And Sakar brought it all together in the final third when Stanley and Zero are alone in the desert, with the readers and viewers given all the clues to piece together history like a jigsaw puzzle. To the characters, they're oblivious, but we are given this personal satisfaction knowing how significant that boat is, and what it meant for Stanley carrying Zero up the mountain when he couldn't stomach the journey halfway through. The movie's more on the nose with these revelations, so I appreciate the book and Sakar for not explicitly reminding me. Reading it and retaining all the information from these stories delivered its own reward and makes you feel real smart for connecting the dots. And after Stanley sang to Zero why they drank and ate, the curse was lifted with the happy ending pretty much set in stone. Stanley's dad finds the answer to his foot odor problem with the mixture of peaches and onions. Stanley's lawyer shuts Camp Green Lake down, and Stanley finds the buried treasure and survives amongst a swarm of yellow spotted lizards because he reeked of onions. But the best change in luck is, after all those days of learning, Zero's reading lessons paid off to save Stanley's fortune at the last second.
It has his name on it.
What?
You see? Stanley Nats.
Learning can be rewarding. Literally. A simple story this is not. Is it an easy read? Yeah, you could probably get through the entire story in a day or two. Did the movie age well? I mean, some of the CGI and green screen really give away its quality, and some might criticize it for being too campy, but I don't mind. I mean, the ending for this film really solidifies the end of Cruel Punishment with the fall of rain, giving the whole scene a real Spielberg feeling. But despite Sakar's humble words, there is a lot to gain from Holes. An idea of what an interracial relationship meant in the past. An in-depth experience about the corruption of some privately owned detention facilities. And a narrative journey from an author who never tries to talk down to you, but encourages you to exercise your understanding of context clues and realize the value of learning. Like I said in the beginning, the book and movie are very equal but tell the story in their own unique vision. I praise the book for being a raw, honest experience through its descriptions, and I love the movie for its small improvements in certain scenes and the incredible cast that brought the characters to life. Especially Scott Plank, who played Trout Walker. Tragically, he died in a car accident 6 months before the movie's release. His screen time may have been short, but the performance was truly memorable, and it's a damn shame he couldn't see how he alone created one of the most legendary memes that came out of this movie.
I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
That's too damn bad!
Rest in peace, Scott. And if you're wondering about the rest, they're doing alright. Shia LaBeouf did go through some rough times, but I'm glad to see him acting again. I recommend checking out his biopic, Honey Boy, which was a screenplay he wrote while attending rehab. Sigourney Weaver is just an amazing actress overall, and we'll probably see her again in Avatar 2, whenever that comes out. And as for our golden boy Zero, Kilo Thomas, he became Max Powerline. If only you liked and subscribe. The story of holes will be trending worldwide, while the trolls hate below. Desperate and lonely, we're rocking the views. If only you liked and subscribed. The story of holes will be trending worldwide, while the trolls hate below. Desperate and lonely, we're rocking the views. If only